these river rocks. I'm excited to talk about these journals, tiny spaces, designs that they offer, sweet grass. This part of the book, there were some questionnaires to fill out. Coral and green, focused on gardens. Welcome or welcome back to Softwoods ASMR. Tonight I'm sharing a very dreamy, multi-sensory discussion of my ongoing small garden plans and thoughts. I'm going to share some library books that I have over here, including a magazine that I'll probably start with, along with some books from my own collection over here, including a native plants book and a creative nonfiction book under here called Braiding Sweetgrass, and a couple of other things there. I've also brought in a few elements from my garden or garden shed, including these river rocks, which I'll talk about a little later. These river rocks are very, very cool to the touch. It seems that even on a hot day in the garden, these rocks stay so cool. And I also have some seeds here that we'll look at a little later. These are all native plants, native flowers, and I'm excited to talk about these. I was noticing earlier that when you turn the package like this, it sounds like a rain stick. If you've ever played with or heard a rain stick. And if you turn all of these together, it really has that effect. It's an amazing sound. So we'll come back to this a little later after we look at some other things here. I've got my tea, which is a delicious raspberry tea, and it's so pink and tastes really nice. And I also have a whole bunch of journals that we'll peek into. These journals are where I've kept notes and lists, and I've mapped out some designs too. So we'll take a peek in these. And this journal here has some very special quotes from literature, including fiction, but a few other places too, such as a song and a few other quotes that I thought could just enrich this little discussion tonight. So I will start actually with a quote, a thought-provoking literary quote about gardens. So I've written out a few favorites here, and I'm going to start with this one. It comes from The Great Gatsby, and that's by F. Scott Fitzgerald. So this one says here, in his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths among the whisperings, and the champagne, and the stars. I just can't get enough of that sentence, thinking about the blue gardens and the moths. So I will share more literary quotes throughout this discussion. But I'm going to begin with a little look into some of the library books. I think we'll start with the magazine. Just put this tea here for now. And I'm going to get this magazine. Just take a peek in here for a minute. Talk about my garden and my ongoing projects there. So this magazine is all about beds and borders. And I thought it would be nice to look at with you. It's definitely going to provide a little inspiration for me. I still consider myself a beginner, even though I've been creating gardens for several years now. I've learned how important gardens are for us and for animals and insects and for our world. I believe in public garden accessibility through community gardens or accessible city gardens. Some of the most beautiful gardens are very small. I've seen some very pretty gardens on balconies and even inside homes by a window set up with herbs. Set up with herbs in little pots and plants hanging above. All of this to say that I love creating or seeing beauty in tiny spaces. How about you? Yeah, I saw a few articles in here about shady borders, and I do have sunny spots and shady spots, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few moments. Yeah, so I love creating or seeing beauty in tiny spaces and little nooks. It's just something amazing about taking a tiny little nook and creating a little magic there, a little unexpected beauty. So I'll definitely learn a little something from this magazine. And yeah, I wanted to do something like this in my herb garden. I have 2 of these. We recently moved and we now have to start all over again with a blank slate. So this is a much smaller space here in this new house, but I see it as an opportunity to create or recreate, really, a gorgeous jewel garden in our backyard. I'm going to share another literary quote with you from this journal. Okay, let's go up to the top here. Cicero. This one is from Cicero. If you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need. I love that one. It's quite famous. I think, practically speaking, we probably need a few more things than that, but why speak practically? Let's just speak poetically and dream about that. If you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need. So, yeah, as I was saying, we recently moved and we have to recreate the gardens that we left behind. And for sure we have made mistakes along the way, so we'll try not to make those mistakes again. But that's the great thing about a garden, is you can constantly sculpt away, and it is quite forgiving. So on the one hand, we've learned a lot, but we are allowed to continue making mistakes. It's just the way I like to garden. So at our last house, we had removed every bit of lawn and grass from the front yard, and a lot of it from the backyard as well. And we had built up quite a large flower garden and had planted a lot of trees as well. So there were shady spots and sunny spots. But the front garden, as I was saying, had no grass at all. And this book here is all about front yard gardens, and my current new front yard is a front lawn. It's all grass, and I plan to slowly but surely remove it all and replace with plants, mostly native plants that we'll talk about in a bit as well. So I like this book, Front Yard Gardens Growing More Than Grass by Liz Primo. The first chapter talks about why we mow and the landscape movement of the upper class and their preference for grass, and just a little bit of the history of yards and grass and lawns and the standard of keeping up a grassy lawn, and just talks about the democratic lawn, the recreational influence. I'm going to guess that golf courses are part of that discussion. The birthplace of lawn ethic. Here's kind of I'd say a little bit of a scary aerial photograph of, houses and lawns, and it's just a lot of lawns and a lack of trees and a lack of color and flowers, and builders, they just put up these houses and then slap down the lawns, and that's what you get. So if you like that kind of thing, well, I'm sure there are advantages for your lifestyle, for sure. But it's really nice that we have the option to turn those lawns into gardens. So it goes more into what the cost of these grassy lawns are to the environment and nature, wildlife, and the pesticides needed to keep them up. So yeah, there's a lot about that in the beginning, and then from there it just goes on to a lot of different styles of gardens. I think there's a section here on the English garden and the cottage garden, and city cottage, and the kinds of plants that grow well in cities, woodland gardens, and all the different types of gardens, styles, and conditions for growing different types of gardens. I would say that mine is a little bit of a fusion garden because, well, I'm not really sure what that means, but I do have mostly native plants, but we do have a few aspects of Japanese gardens that we've melded in with the native plants, and I would say there's also sort of an English garden feeling to some of the parts, so somehow it all comes together. As I say, it's a very small garden. Sounds like I've got a lot going on. I do, but it is still very small. So this is going to help me as I continue to work on the front garden. And then I have another one here called Home Outside. And in this one, it's beautiful, but there was one chapter in particular that caught my eye. It was sensory pleasures. I like this chapter because it's really paying attention to how to create gardens that appeal to all the senses. So textures, a sense of touch, a sense of sight, obviously through colors and through structures, and a sense of sound, hearing. And you can plant trees and plants that have beautiful rustling leaves, or you can incorporate water that has sound, that offers sound. Tastes. Trying to find 2 or 4. Yeah, so this whole chapter looks at appealing to the senses. So a sense of taste through perhaps edible flowers or foods, herbs. And what other sense have I not covered here? Touch, sight, hearing, sound, and taste. I think I covered them all. So this chapter is going to help me think a little more about that. I always appreciate these designs that they offer. So those are the library books that I plan to read, think about. If you've watched my other videos, you know that I have a lot of library books on the go. I think it's time for a literary quote about gardens. So, let's just see. We looked at this one. And we've looked at this one. Let's look at this one now. It says here, if you look the right way, you can see that the whole world is a garden. And that's from The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. That's a really interesting way of looking at the whole world. And it seems correct to me. So I'm going to show you a few of the books from my own collection now that I consult with frequently. Like this one, it says 2020, it is currently 2024, but there's a little story behind this. It is written in England by an English author. The story behind this is that this is the Almanac, a seasonal guide to 2020, and I really want to get the one for 2025. just goes through the months of the year. And I live in North America, but a huge percentage of my DNA is from this part of the world. I have roots in Scotland, Ireland, and England, along with France and Sweden. So, I don't know, I just wanted to kind of read through this almanac month by month and kind of just imagine living there. It talks about the moon cycles. Yeah, at each beginning of each month, it highlights some of the important things about that month. It talks about the moon and the sky that month, and gardening by the moon. So this is related to gardening, what's happening in nature, and the flower garden, and the kitchen garden, what's happening in the kitchen. Gives a recipe each month, and or two. Winter fish this time, charm of the month, and then it gives a little song with some lyrics here, and moves on to the next month, and pretty much covers all the same things monthly. So I would say this is like a nostalgia reference book for me, because it's not very practical, since none of it applies to me on a practical level, but it does on a kind of imaginative level, if that makes any sense. So I probably will order another one of these. Now this one I recommend to everyone. This is not a gardening book per se. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass, and you can apply the concepts to your life and to nature and to your gardening practices if you garden, or just to your knowledge base. So the subtitle here is Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants by Robin Wall Kimmerer. It's by Milkweed Editions. And this is for me a kind of book that I can have another book on the go, a novel at any time, and just head into here and read a chapter. In a way, it kind of reads like a long essay, and then I can go back and read another one, another chapter, another time. I have enjoyed reading this very slowly because I like to really absorb the concepts and think about them and kind of not move too quickly to the next concepts or teachings. So the writing style is beautiful. She has a very poetic way of sharing her knowledge. Yeah, so this is just a gorgeous book, and I highly recommend it, even if you don't live in North America. Braiding Sweetgrass. Braiding Sweetgrass. And then next book is an absolute favorite. This is all about native plants and the importance of planting native plants. This is specific to a certain area of North America, but this author, it looks like it's written by two authors, but this is the author I know, Lorraine Johnson. She has written many other books, so if you live in North America, there is something for everyone, I believe, in these books. But it is kind of like, it lists a lot of plants back here. This section, this whole section here, is mostly plant lists, where to grow, whether shade or sunny locations, and the heights of each plant, and the blooming period, whether spring, summer, fall, or 3-season blooms. So that is very helpful for planning. But this whole book is focused on creating habitat for native pollinators, specifically the rusty-patched bumblebee. And so this part of the book talks about the importance of planting native plants, why they matter, and how to get started with a garden. That is primarily built around native plants. So I think in here I just have some designs. And then the last book I'm going to show you is this one. I love this book. At my last house, I had a kale garden. It wasn't even that big. It was about a 4x4 sized garden, and had a few different varieties of kale in this one garden. And I harvested so much kale that I was able to freeze kale. I think it was around the end of August. I took so much of it and just kind of washed it off a little bit, let it dry, and put it in containers, individual containers in the freezer. And I froze the kale, and I had kale for the whole winter into the spring. That little garden made so much kale. And I do plan to create a kale garden again. So here at this house right now, I just have herbs and onions because it was just a later start. So so this book is called Kale and Friends, the Book of Kale and Friends. So the friends are companion plants and herbs. So it talks about some different varieties of kale, and starting from seedlings, which I did. I started my kale from seed and had them by a window inside, and it was still snowing out when I started the seedlings. I did some curly kale and some red-tipped kale, and my favorite, which is like a flat leaf dino kale. And think I had another, like 2 types of curly green. And so this has just been a really helpful book that I've referred to so many times. And I would try to grow this. It's fennel, so tall and beautiful. But I didn't have luck with that one. Yeah, so lots of recipes here. After that year of kale, of the frozen kale, I was all kaleed out for sure. I mean, I like kale, but I don't want to eat it every day, you know what I mean? And it actually freezes well, and I was doing some stir fries with it. I was adding it to soups. And occasionally I would make a kale smoothie. I know that sounds gross to some people, but it was really good. I had like frozen blueberries and raspberries and coconut yogurt, and I would add hemp and hemp seeds and flax and some kale. And I tried that out a few times. Just kind of made that one up. And it was pretty good. I love smoothies though in the morning because they are easy to consume if you're not starving or if you're in a hurry. But they do have a little bit that go into them, so. But I try to make them easy to put together. So that's my kale book, which I love so much. And my native plants book, which I adore. And braiding sweetgrass, which is such an inspiration. And my fascination with English gardens. And the seasons over there in England and or Scotland and Ireland. So I'm going to share a few more of these quotes here. So we looked at this one and this one and this one. Let's go down to this quote from Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. This is a beautiful one. It says here, a garden to walk in and immensity to dream in. What more could he ask? A few flowers at his feet, and above him the stars. That's gorgeous. And the last quote here, before I show you my garden planning books, like my journals, and talk about these seeds and these rocks. This is a quote from a song. Let's see if you recognize it. We are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. Does that sound familiar? That is from Joni Mitchell. So I loved collecting those thought-provoking quotes. So let's look at some of my other journals here. is my older, very, very messy journal. I took a webinar. For some reason, I wrote 700 attendees. So there were 700 people taking this webinar. It was all about native plants and why we should be concerned and why we should plant native plants. I was just giving tips too, and I wrote down some links to some different places, such as nurseries and things like that. And I don't know what that is. I think this is a very rough sketch of what I was going to do in a woodland garden in my last house. Not sure what that is. So I do look at these notes sometimes, especially the links. And I'll put this here for a second. In this one, this is my most recent plans. I took a course. It lasted several weeks. And it helped me prepare for the garden that I started in our new backyard. And over those weeks, you learn how to create a general sketch of the things that you'd like to see in your yard. It helps you with knowing what you do and don't want. Somewhere in here, yeah, there were some questionnaires to fill out. And I filled these 2 questionnaires out. It just helped you understand your wants and needs. And then the instructor had us writing some lists out and thinking about things. So these are all my notes here. Again, very messy because he was speaking fast. And we talked about bubble maps, which is something you do before you create I forget what he called it, but like more of a, what did he call it? I guess it was a final design that you use graph paper for. So one of the things he had us do was several iterations of our garden designs. So start with like what you're working with, and then work in some of the different elements you want to see in your garden. So I have like my patio here. This looks big, but it's actually very small. And so I wrote in like some of the things I want to see, such as different kinds of trees here, and where I wanted my garden beds and my veggie beds. And everything's to scale, but he really stressed the importance of doing several of these. So this is another one. It's very messy, but I have like shade plants over here, and I wanted to do like flowers, shrubs, and rocks over here. I wanted to put a tree here, planters over here. Somewhere in here is my final map that we actually used, my final design, and I pretty much stuck with a lot of this, but I've only gotten this far so far. So again, here's my patio. It's stone. And this is all flat, so my kitchen is here. You walk out here onto the patio. This was already here, but everything else was just grass. So in my plan, I wanted to put some shade plants here. So I did that. I put some ferns here, native ferns. Over here, I did a path and dug up all this area here and here and mulched it for flower beds. But this path is a path like through these two trees that I planted. I did a Japanese maple here, which is not, it's not a native obviously, but I just love this Japanese maple, so I did incorporate a few of them actually. So this one is a native pink flowering dogwood. I planted that here. And what's not on here is I did plant another Japanese maple on this side of this path, and it's called an autumn moon maple. Isn't that gorgeous? Autumn moon maple, and it's kind of like, this one is red. This Japanese maple is red, and this one is like, it's almost coral and green, like chartreuse in spots. It's really nice, but I got it very small, so it was affordable because it was so small. So you walk along here and there's flowers, and we have a little tiny waterfall that we put here, but I actually put it on this side of the path, and another one over here. These are things I've thrifted and stuff over the years, so they were very affordable and not expensive. And I have a little bench up here at the end of the path, and we put an oak here. And on this side of I'm just going to color this in green so you can see. This is the path from the patio through these trees that we've planted that are babies right now. And there's an oak tree here that we planted. Actually, it's here, but it's a little bit more like that. So we've gone up to here, and on the side, I just plunked down a few boxes, cedar boxes for some herbs and lavender and what else did I do there? Some onions, different kinds of onions and chives. So I haven't really gotten to this because we are going to remove the grass and put gravel on there and put some things along the fence and develop that a little bit more, but we have achieved this. There's more to do. We need to put more flowers and stuff in here, but we have ordered some very special native plants I'm excited to put in here. We also have a bird bath over here, and we get so many birds taking baths in the bird bath, and it's close to the waterfall, and the birds go from the little bath over to the waterfall and perch on the stones of it and take a little sip. So I still have to do all of this, so it will take some time. And what I have over here, go back to these seeds here. With these seeds, I ordered them. Well, I bought them, I should say. I bought them at a little nursery, and unfortunately I did not get them into the ground on time because we were moving into this house, and it just, we were too rushed with so many things. So I really hope that I'm still able to use these. It doesn't say they have an expiration date or anything, but these again are also native flowers. So we've got wild bergamot, black-eyed Susans. We've got little blue stem, which is a grass. This one is anise hyssop. It kind of looks like a blazing star. Is that the same thing? I have no idea. I'm still learning. But I do have something called blazing star that I picked up, so it looks a lot like that. And here we have a common evening primrose. So, yeah, I've been getting all of my plants as little plants. But these are seeds, so I will be happy if I can use these next spring. And with these rocks, I have been building a little river around the tiny rock waterfall. So that's what I'm doing with these. As I said before, they're so cool, like cold to the touch. I love them. I could go on and on about gardens, and I can see myself doing future videos focused on gardens, different aspects of them. I hope you enjoyed this discussion about my gardening plans. I hope it brought you some peace. I hope you're resting well. Until next time, please take good care of yourself.